Welcome to On the Record and welcome to a new season. I'm Megan Shepard, in for Jerome Sawyer. In the Bahamas, connection isn't just a luxury. It's how an entire archipelago stays stitched together. It's how a student in Grand Bahama can learn from a lecturer in the capital in real time. How a clinic in Eleuthera can reach a specialist in another country. And how a business in Abaco can trade with the Out Islands. And how families stay close even when the sea keeps us apart. A new docuseries titled The Untold Story of Cable Bahamas is about to premiere, promising to pull back the curtain on the company's origin story and the fight it took to bring the technology and innovation needed to push this country forward. So stay tuned as we get started on the other side of this break. This is On the Record. Tonight, we're joined by Cable Bahamas Group of Companies CEO Franklyn Butler II. We haven't seen the documentary as yet, so I'm excited for this conversation and to get into a deep dive. Mr. Butler, thank you so much for being here. But before we get into the series and the company that is Cable Bahamas, let's talk a little bit about yourself. I like fun facts, and one fun fact I learned recently is that you were actually an intern for the company at some point. Talk a little bit about that season and what you learned from that season.
Yes, thank you so much, Megan, and good evening, Bahamas. So Megan, my journey with Cable Bahamas really started in, I think, 1996 or 7 as a summer student. And so I had an opportunity at the time. I thought I wanted to be an engineer as you go through life. And I think Phil Keeping and some of the Canadians at the time thought, listen, they'd be happy to allow me to do a summer internship here because I'd expressed this interest in being an engineer. And so that's really how my journey with Cable Bahamas started. And so I started during that summer really focused in the head end, looking at how TV signals were being distributed across the country. And I remember working with a guy by the name of Ted Young, and at the time the Bahamian understudy was Trevor Cuffey. And so Trevor was probably one of my first supervisors from a head-end perspective. And so I spent a couple of weeks doing that. Following that, I spent some time with the service delivery team. Keith Mackey was my manager, I think, or I don't know if Keith was the manager. Keith certainly was the guy that took me out every day. So I had an opportunity to do installs at customers' home, climb ladders, and so it was really an incredible opportunity to understand what at the time and still remains like world-class technology, right? Because cable TV was something that today we think is like synonymous, but at that time, we used to have only ZNS channel 13, and you would go and connect via an antenna. So it was really important to be a part of that revolution and that whole transformation of the Bahamas.
So where did you think your curiosity for systems and problem solving got started, and who or what shaped that?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I think it's easy looking back at this stage and thinking there was a curiosity of systems and problem solving. I'm not sure that's really where it started, to be very honest with you. I'm not a technologist. I am very much an accountant, so I did accounting and finance as a part of my fundamental training. And so only as I kind of had people come to you, so I was a board member at Cable. I think I joined the board either in 2011 or 2012. And quite frankly, I don't know if it was an interest in systems as much as an interest in problem solving. So at the time, we had members of the executive team who would come and address a particular concern. And so that's really how my interest in problem solving, I think, got ignited. And then from there, because I'd gone through and I was working in our own family business, and once you get into leadership, unfortunately for me, I lost my father at the age of 26. And so I had to take over our then family business. And so, yeah, obviously, when you inherit a business, a multi-generational business with such a rich history as the Butler family, certainly you learn how to problem solve very, very quickly. And so I think that's really where my interest around problem solving began. And so, just delighted to be able to come to cable at the time and to be able to help, because that's really what it started with, is how can I help the management team as a board member, try to address concerns at Cable Bahamas.
What was that season like? What was Franklyn Butler as a young professional? What was that season like for you? And what did you think that journey would take you?
Yeah. So I think it was one of a lot of fear, quite frankly, when you lose your father at a very young age. You're managing a multi-generational business, a multi-million-dollar business. Quite frankly, you don't know what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
There were some things I did know, but the reality is there's a lot of naivety that you contend with, and as a part of that is this notion of fear, because you want to make one decision right all the time, and you have this notion that success looks like every decision done right.
Mm-hmm.
The reality you learn as you go through the journey of life is that success is multiple decisions done wrong that you never give up on fixing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that for me was really what kind of catapulted me in that season, is really going through the pain and anxiety, fear of often making the wrong decision, creating lots of tension and waves, in ways that quite frankly you hoped could be smoother, calmer seas. And so that was really what that journey looked like, a period of learning very quickly, quite frankly probably creating a lot of frustration, some self-inflicted and otherwise, dealing with dynamics of a very strong family, that leadership is a core value, I would say. And so that in itself created challenges, and being 26 and leading a family business that had the legacy was one that certainly I think I succeeded at over the long term, but I think that's a matter of perspective, but one that I learned a lot of important lessons from.
Obviously, a lot of pressure, sure. But as you mentioned, the fear and just wanting to do things right. Do you think that was a time when Cable Bahamas became something personal rather than a job or career, but a personal?
Certainly for me. So I think if we transition from Milo Butler then to Cable Bahamas, for me, what is interesting is they say a prophet's never recognized in his own hometown, right? So if I think about my journey at Milo Butler, the reality was that at times, some of the things that my family thought I didn't do right, the community started to recognize I was doing well, that I had a perspective. Some of those lessons that I told you I learned in making mistakes, quite frankly, where really opportunity people said, listen, I suspect this young man is doing some stuff. And so when I joined Cable, what I took great delight in was being able to be an advisor to the board and to the CEO to offer a unique perspective, because I think everybody who knows Cable Bahamas did not traditionally have what I would call Bahamian management and a lot of Bahamian board representation. I think the government did appoint Bahamian directors in the early days as a part of the original shareholders agreement where there's a trust, but there wasn't large representation of Bahamians at the board level when I joined. And so I took great pleasure to be able to offer that perspective. And I think that perspective, has helped us to shape Cable Bahamas. And I hope that I was a value. I mean, to now be in the role of CEO and president of the business, hopefully suggests that I created some value on the way. I mean, our shareholders are the ultimate determinators of that, and of course the wider community. And so, we are a work in progress.
What was day one for you like as CEO? You mentioned bringing those perspectives, overcoming that fear that turned into lessons. What was that like for you day one walking into the office?
So what was interesting about day one was, I think, what for me stood out was, here is this very complex organization that felt very technical. And I knew nothing about the technology that ran what I would call the internet or cable TV, because we were transitioning from that time from what I would call coax to digital TV, and lots of initiatives that at the moment were very confusing. Obviously I'd heard about them from a board perspective, but to be in it. And so I remember early on, I don't know if it was my day one of the things I did do was simply sat in the contact center. And I sat with agents, and people were like, listen, why do you do this? Why are you here? So I think the early days, if not day one, was very much around just being curious and quite frankly, nobody really called on me because I didn't come in as CEO. I came in as executive vice chairman with a requirement to spend 2 or 3 days a week. And that for me was really just about spending time with the teams. And a lot of people were like, listen, like, why are you here in the contact center? Why are you going on a truck roll and trying to understand this business? This is not what executives do. So I think the first thing I probably did was just, completely obliterated people's perceptions of what executives should do by sitting in the room and just saying, listen, put me on a call. Let me understand a little bit what you do. And then inevitably that created lots of questions about, people didn't have simple things, and people start to vent a little bit to you about, this is my little frustration. And so that's really kind of how I kind of got involved in the business, was really with a very on the front line perspective around the business very early on, partly because I was a summer intern many years before that. And then secondly, when I joined, I started very much at the front lines and trying to just talk to people, understand, and I'd imagine people had a perception. This new person came, is executive vice chairman, fancy title, and then they saw this guy was prepared to sit down and have a conversation, and people didn't quite know what to do with you. And so that really was my journey, and I loved it because I got to learn lots of little things, and I didn't necessarily know how to fix it, but then that took me on a journey now as I started to speak to people at the front line to say, listen, executive team, tell me, how do we deal with this? Or how does this work? And so one of the things I think even now the team knows about me is I don't know the answer, so I'm big on questions. So I never go in a room, nobody ever sends an email or a pre-read to me and I don't respond, because for me it's really about understanding what I don't understand. And that has probably been the biggest single, maybe reason for my success, is this notion of curiosity and simply just trying to find out a little bit more so that I can be helpful to whether those employees, customers, whoever it is. So that's really been my journey.
I was about to ask, how do you think spending so much time on the front lines and learning all of the different aspects and departments, how has that shaped you as a leader?
Well, I think that is really a part of how philosophically I think my grandfather, Milo Butler, lived his life. I mean, anybody who knows his story as a politician, as a business person, he was always on the front line. And so growing up in our family business and with my dad and uncles, a lot of it was, listen, you had to be in the shop. You had to understand the customer's needs. And so that was not something that was necessarily what I would call cable-centric for me. This was really just who
as a person
I found out I was because of how I was brought up. And so today, I think if you speak to any butlers, we tend to be very much on the front line in a lot of things that we tend to do. And so for me, being at the front line was just natural. That was the only thing I knew. I always tell people, I wasn't born an executive. I was born packing groceries. I was born at the front line of business. I was born, my dad had a sense that, listen, in order for you to understand this, you gotta work it. You ain't gonna live entitled. As Franklyn's son, my dad's son, he was very intentional about that. And I think many of my cousins grew it up as a part of our legacy. And so I will tell you that the front line for me was just really where the magic happened. And even today, one of the things that we've been doing here in our leadership journey is, I think even now as our employees have witnessed me, particularly over the most recent past, they've seen me very much at the front line, engaging, asking questions. Why aren't things working? Tell me a little bit more about what you do. And this notion that I have kind of focused on recently, something called where we learn, then we teach, then we manage, and then we transform. And that's really become the mantra that which I try to live my life as CEO, and really try to spend focus on our teams when we engage with them, that, listen, the first thing I want to do from you is learn from you. Then if I understand what you are doing, then I may teach you one or two things. Oftentimes you're doing the teaching. And then we start to think about, what does management look like? Like, how do we measure things? How do we make sure we're being successful? And then ultimately, if we understand that, then how do we transform it? And that's really been what I would call a kind of leadership philosophy that I've been unlocking here in the organization over the last 12 months.
I like it. So as the first Bahamian CEO, what were some of the challenges you faced?
Yeah, so I think as the first Bahamian CEO, the reality is when you are the CEO of a technology company and things are changing quickly. I mean, since I've been CEO, I think we've seen the I wouldn't even call it the evolution, but even more so than evolution, the prevalence of OTT and how it's disrupted what was a cable TV business for us. So cable TV was really how we started, and we see whether it's Netflix and Hulu and all these wonderful technologies that now ride on top of it. We've seen the advent of social media with WhatsApp calls and we have been what I call a metered voice service. Those are the things that have really transformed the industry. And as CEO, those are things that we have managed through and overcome by focusing on what is fundamental to the business, which is this notion that if we can focus on people and our people are focused on our customers, more people, then ultimately you get to understand that, listen, fundamentally people want to be treated with dignity and respect. They want a service that works and works consistently. And ultimately, if you can provide that to the consumers, then you have an opportunity to build trust in that relationship where people are often, even as technologies advance, they often find a way to create value for the consumer. And that is the journey that I think as a CEO, whether it's in telecommunications or in anything else, you're trying to unlock trust in the consumer's mindset. The product is a service that you provide, and yes, you need to keep up with technology, you need to keep up with what is happening. For us, because we are an essential part of infrastructure, whether that is mobile or fixed, TV or voice or any other service that you may necessarily, the fundamental thing about that is it all rides on the internet. That is what digitization is for. And because we have these infrastructure, piping, connectivity to the US and other countries through the internet, ultimately we have this central value creator that we are able to unlock through these trust relationships. It's just changed. We no longer do it with voice services to the extent we did. We no longer do it with TV services to the extent we do. But we absolutely still do it from an internet and connectivity perspective.
Absolutely. You kind of touched on it a little bit, but what were some of the challenges or the problems that you wanted to solve for Bahamians in terms of speed, access, cost, fairness? What were some of the challenges or the problems that you wanted to address?
So I think if we think about it, I don't know if we necessarily get to speed, access on its own. I think really what you want to get to is how do we get Bahamians to recognize that we are stewards of this business. And yes, we have a service that we provide, and as change happens, how do we think continually around what value looks like to the consumer? Because speed is just one way that value looks to the consumer. Dependability is just another notion of value creation to the consumer. So I would say to you that I don't know that we started with speed or we started with uptime or anything, but we started around what is value? How do we create value? And so that is one thing, because value continues to evolve in this journey of telecommunications. If we are not obsessed about what value creation looks like, Megan, that was really the biggest thing we held on to. Because what happens is if you tie it to what I would call voice services or you tie it to TV services, then people say you're dying when TV dies. We're not dying. We're recreating ourselves. And so we've gone through this notion as a leader of constantly trying to get people, how are we recreating ourselves? Because ultimately that is what we're doing in telecommunications every day, constantly recreating ourselves. So you start at 3G, so people start to use 4G. I mean, there was a time in my time when we used to have TV, we could download a video to your phone, it was buffering. And people would talk about how you couldn't get a video. Or we almost take it for granted now because it is something that through the journey in telecommunications, we have recreated that value proposition. There was a time, Megan, when people wanted TV alone. Nobody wants TV alone, hardly anyone. The fundamental thing people say is give me internet and I want as much of it as I can get and make sure it's dependability. And so those are the notions of how we've focused on value creation and leading our colleagues in our organization to think about value creation, not necessarily speed or dependability alone, but what is value? Because I think that is really what has changed. I always tell people, probably around the time I joined the business, people were more concerned about having internet to their desktop. Then we went through this idea that value wasn't about internet to your desktop, because in your house, you decided you didn't need internet at an individual PC, you wanted internet throughout the house. So we had to figure out how to get wireless modems that allow people to have wireless access throughout their home. That was another evolution in the value creation story of Cable Bahamas, and that's really what we are focused on. So we've gone through many of those iterations. We continue to work through those iterations now as we go through the launch of our live fiber service. And of course, you know, what we've done on the mobile side with Alive as well, and making sure that people have connectivity everywhere. We enabled WhatsApp. I remember in the early days of the launch of Alive, people saying, oh, we were going to disband WhatsApp, free calling. That is nonsensical. I mean, that is not how the market works. That's not how we see value creation. Value creation is when you see our technician roll up to your house and they deal with you with a level of care. And we have some incredible technicians. We have some incredible customer service agents. I know not everyone has had a great experience from time to time, but we do have some incredible individuals at the front lines who are, when they go into your house, you go, wow, these guys are really good. I just got a letter of commendation from a customer who was a little frustrated saying, listen, man, these 4 individuals, they sent me a letter just last night, did an incredible job, and they stuck with it to make sure they got the level of connectivity. And that is the value creation that we are focused on, because that will continue to change. While our products evolved, it is that mindset that we ultimately want to make sure that we are imparting throughout our organization.
I can absolutely attest to the technicians. I have experienced some great ones myself. You touched on the changes that, or maybe you can expand some more about some of the changes you've seen in the industry since taking over.
Yep. So I think I've talked a little bit about that, Megan. So I think when I joined the business, we were very much into what I would call fixed services. And I always remember when you called our customer service, I'm sure our customers will laugh. The first thing we used to tell you is plug in your device directly to the modem. Because the issue you have with your download speeds or upload speeds is really because you have a cheap wireless router. That's really the journey you started with. And so now we're like, listen, we're not even going to let you buy what used to be a Netgear router, and you would buy the cheapest one for $39.99. We said, listen, ma'am, the problem is you got a really cheap router. What we're focused on now, Megan, if we go from that, is we no longer even deliver you technology via what we call HFC, which is hybrid fiber coaxial, which is basically where we take fiber to like the curb and then we use a coaxial cable to take it into your house. We now do fiber to the home, which is where that fiber connectivity, that piece of glass, goes directly from our head end directly to your home, into your bedroom, your living room, wherever it is that you want your internet connectivity, which means that you have the ability to get up to 10 gigabits. I mean, we recently won an award for the fastest fixed network in the region. And that is because we have really evolved in our technology delivery, where we give you fiber, glass, directly to your bedroom, directly to your home. And we are now in this process of evolving all of our HFC customers to this Alive fiber product that we have launched and has been giving us incredible speeds. And so that is really the evolution that we continue to go through. We're now talking through what does 5G look like for the Bahamas and how do we position ourselves as the regulator, IRCA, continues to do its public consultation around what 5G looks like and spectrum management looks like. So that is really the evolutions that we continue to go through. And I'm sure if I wanted to be a little bit more specific, there have been lots of micro journeys on that bigger journey, but that's been the journey we've gone through in telecommunications since I've been in charge.
And for those that aren't really a part of the telecom world, what's the biggest misconception people have about what it takes to run this national network?
Well, I think the biggest notion people have is that the internet comes from the air. The reality is wireless is still undergirded by some fixed fiber optics to a tower or to some backhaul mechanism, right? And so I know there's been lots of Starlink conversations. There's been, what about the internet? And so ultimately, we still see fixed connectivity as fundamental to making sure that as a country and as a nation, we have incredible access to information. And while that is more costly and while there are alternatives, we still believe that that fixed infrastructure provides a premium level of value creation to the consumer that is not going to go away anytime soon. And so that, I think, is probably the biggest misconception to our base and to our consumers, is that everything happens wireless. The reality is it happens wirelessly, ultimately driven through kind of fix infrastructure. And we believe that that's here to stay.
Awesome. And so what leadership lesson did you learn the hard way? Something you wish time travel could tell 2018, Mr. Butler, taking over this role?
Boy, now that's a great question. I think one of the leadership lessons that I've learned in taking over this business is that no matter how you are trained and no matter what I know, it really doesn't matter if you cannot reach the hearts and minds of others around you. Mm-hmm. So leadership is not about how smart I am, but about how well I can connect with those very people at the front line who may have had a different experience growing up, who may not have had Franklyn Butler Sr. as their father or Clementine Butler as their mother in my case, who had very different values and very different experiences from me. But how do I find a way to connect with them? That is really one of the things that I think is the biggest lesson, the biggest thing that I wish I learned, and something that is a journey even now I still continue to work on, because what I learn every day in leadership is, yep, okay, I can get it, whatever that is, the technology, customer service, the billing issues. But me getting it means nothing if I, as I call in our teams, if I don't get our 800 strong army of associates and colleagues to understand how that creates value to our consumer. And often that means that you got to come down out of your office, you got to ask the questions, be curious, connect with them in a different way, because everybody sees value from where they start, not necessarily from where I start. And that is really the one thing that I think probably could have expedited my journey, and to continue to be open to other people's perspective.
I think that is a great point to put a pin in it. We will take a break and we will come back. And when we do come back, we will dig into this much anticipated docu-series, The Untold Story of Cable Bahamas. Be sure to stay with us. You're watching On the Record. Welcome back to On the Record. We are still here with Mr. Franklyn Butler II, CEO of the Cable Bahamas Group of Companies. Thank you so much for sticking with us. Mr. Butler, into the main event, The Untold Story of Cable Bahamas. What was the vision behind this docuseries?
So Megan, I think what's important is cable has been around now 30 years, right? And so we celebrated just in 2025, the 30th year anniversary of cable. And one of the things as CEO, I challenged our team to think about is, how have we really documented the history of telecommunications as a part of, or Cable Bahamas as a part of that story? And so I think that's really what prompted this docu-series. And I think there's been so many stories around who Cable Bahamas is. You know, there have been obviously challenges as we have advanced technology. And we thought, what better way to communicate for the country the role that telecommunications has played in our national development, the role that Cable Bahamas and everyday Bahamians who never saw a future in telecommunications have driven what we now describe at Cable Bahamas as the nation's network. And how when people look at events like Dorian, and they look at how we continue to keep the Bahamas connected, how do we really get people to understand what it takes to make sure that we keep you connected, that you have access to information, we empower, we inform, we get you to experience more through our network. And so that really was what caused us to say, listen, let's document the story.
So the docuseries is titled The Untold Story of Cable Bahamas. What exactly is the untold story that you want people to walk away from knowing?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's much an untold story, Megan, as much as sometimes it's an inconvenient story of Cable Bahamas. And I say that because Cable Bahamas has always been mired by the political elements of the story, where foreigners were chosen over Bahamians to provide telecommunications or cable services, actually, when Cable Bahamas was founded. And we have evolved so much from this legacy or heritage where the Canadians were brought in, where Bahamians were chosen, foreigners were chosen over Bahamians, to now where we are a 100% Bahamian-owned company in ownership, and we are a 100% owned company in terms of what I would call leadership roles. So we not only own the equity, but we own the results because we have executives who are female Bahamians, males and Bahamians. We have a team of technicians who are out there who have been trained by the Canadians and others who are making 5G a reality, fiber to the home a reality. These are your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your aunts and uncles who are really making a difference today. But yes, we did start with some inconvenience. And I'm sure that the political times that we are going into, the political season, will highlight those issues. But don't forget the end game.
Why the docuseries now? Why the grand scale? Why is now the time to tell this story?
Because I think, Megan, 30 years is just so much that has happened. It is a significant milestone in our national development. Obviously, I talked about independence. We talk about just celebrating majority rule just a few days ago. The story is so important for the country to understand that what Bahamians can do when we put our mind to it. When we listen and engage you, our consumers who are watching this docuseries, that is what we are constantly working on every day. To make sure that as the country grows with more foreign direct investment, whether that's with Bahamas, whether that is with any of the projects that are being done across our islands, how do we continue to make sure that the Bahamas is one that is at the forefront of global competitiveness? And so we take great pride, Megan, in when we win fixed network in the region, best fixed network for multiple years. And we understand that for the next 6 months, we're going to win that same award because we are focused on making sure that not only that we make profits, but we advance the country at a national level. We want to be partners with foreign investors who want to make communities like Mayagona and Auckland's and Crooked Island. Because people thought well, cable was only a company for the 4 main islands. We've now expanded our network now into the Exuma Keys. We are now having a fiber route from South Eleuthera now back into Exuma as well, continuing to advance our footprint to this nation, to this idea that we could be the nation's network. So while others may falter, we rise.
Absolutely.
And that is the spirit with which this document series is really going to talk about. And so we have our competitors. We have people like Leon Williams talk about his story and what he saw. We have Felicity Johnson, who came from the other side at BTC, and now to sit in the chairs at Cable as we went through the launch of the second mobile network and certain strategic acquisitions on the journey. We had people like Brendan Paddock, who was one of the founding shareholders of Cable, who then sold his interest in Cable to then take BTC foreign, if I could put it that way. It is a story that many Bahamians do not necessarily understand, that while it still says Bahamas Telecommunications Company, the jury is out.
The jury is out. You touched on it a little bit just a second ago, and I want to expand on that. Majority rule. Why was that such a turning point for our country?
Well, I think majority rule was a turning point because it gave every individual an opportunity to set their own course. That one man, one vote, not one company. And as you know, I think this is not a matter of politics, this is just history. That in our country, there's a history of oligarchs and the economic interests being separate from the masses. What I think majority rule allowed us to do is not necessarily transfer economic interests, but to give us the opportunity to transfer the economic interest from the elites to the everyday Bahamian. And listen, that is the mission of every politician, but in business, that is also the story of KO Bahamas. This is why I highlight the story of going from a foreign investor now to one where the company is now Bahamian owned, Bahamian managed, where more people that look like me and you are in executive leadership roles, not just at color level, but females. We got focused on technicians. So people hear about the Inspire Her event we had, where we had the president of BET Networks, Deborah Lee and Tabitha Brown. We are really championing this notion of Bahamian excellence. That is why majority rule was important, because it gave us an opportunity to say, listen, no longer are we a victim of a system that stacked against us, but one now, if we seek to dream, if we seek to step out, set sail, we could certainly make track. And we see KO Bahamas as a part of the make track in the majority rule story, and one where we've again gone from victim to victor.
Absolutely. And do you believe political control was enough for true independence? Why or why not?
I think political control is a part of the journey. But political control is fundamentally driven by what I call individual education and empowerment. And so political control on its own can't do anything. A politician still got to sign a contract with somebody that still needs institutions, it still needs individuals who dream to bring the bright ideas. The more you get into leadership and politics with multi-stakeholders, the more your interest is divided, which means we got to have a strong electorate, a strong base. And this is one of the things that I take personally as a grandson of Samailo, this notion that we got to empower people. This is why I spend time not only talking about, okay, did we make money, but did we impact you as an employee of this organization? How do I get you to think about, if you're a supervisor or a manager, you looking at the metrics? You making a difference to someone else's life? Because you ain't here to do what I say, you here to do what creates value for the consumer. And that is ultimately a journey of education and empowerment, because what we know, Megan, is when people get it for themselves, you don't know who they are. You don't know what potential is in every single individual. And I think that is really what, when you ask the question is, does political power all the things? No, that's just the beginning. The real emphasis is when you have political power and authority and influence, how do you continue to pour into others to get the wheel to self-fulfill? People to get to this notion of self-actualization. And that is a continuum that we continue to fight through.
Absolutely. So set the stage for us. What did connection mean in the Bahamas before modern telecoms, and who had access, who didn't?
Boy, connection probably meant books at some point, right? If we think about it, right? Because that was how people were educated. You go and you get a textbook, or you get a book to read, or a magazine that was probably shipped on a boat.
Those encyclopedias that everyone had in their house.
I tell people that's how you did research. Growing up, I had an encyclopedia.
My mom still has her set.
My point to people today is, if you were born probably after 2000, you probably don't even know what an encyclopedia is. Because encyclopedias was a sign of almost affluence that you had made it, because you would have bought a set of encyclopedias. But that's how we were educated. That's how we got connected. That's how we were connected, where these books were ways in which connections happened. That's how you had an imagination. We ain't had Netflix to take us and tell us the story. We had to use our imagination. You read the words and you envision what that could be. And it's amazing what that would do with your mind. And then as we came along and BTC came along, connection looked like a telephone call. Yeah, hello, and that was revolutionary. Anybody know about buying a phone? God. Because recently I was in another city in Europe, and they still had phone boxes where you would have to go into a phone box and pick up the phone and dial. I mean, I remember literally in university going and having to call me, and you stand in the phone box and talk for hours because you didn't even have a phone in your room. Then you went to this notion of phones in your room, and then you had the internet, which I tell people, just like you had an encyclopedia in the library, you used to go to the desktop because that was the new encyclopedia. And when you go on the internet, you would hear this this very funny dial-up signal. And I remember the first time our competitors came to high school. And then we went from cable TV. And then we went into what we call internet over HFC. Instead of from dial-up, and now we're into this way of connecting however you want it, wherever you want it, from the sky, from wirelessly in your house, any way you want to be connected. We are now giving you the opportunity to experience more. That is the essence of what Cable Bahamas is doing, experiencing more on the nation's network.
Absolutely. So, what did the creation of Butelco represent for the country?
Well, I think, again, the journey of the Bahamas was one where we needed these institutions. And these institutions were called corporations, where the government saw an obligation to advance the infrastructure of the country. And so Butelco was that vehicle that was created. And Leon in the documentary talks about that, and Felicity. And so that is really where, just a part of our national development we had to go through. And so now Butelco, there came a time where they say, well, governments can't move fast enough because technology was happening. I just talked about the evolution from 2G to 3G to 4G, now to 5G, and now even 6G. Government's got to find that capital, or private enterprise could find that capital. And we found that governments generally around the world are recognizing that the speed of advancement is one that capital from private citizens and from institutions are better able to serve than the government itself. And so that is really what BTC represented, or Butelco, and has now evolved to us at Cable, and where we are all now private enterprise, obviously us being 100% Bahamian and them having some foreign interest. And so that is really what BTC represented, and what we have gone on and advanced even further, from phone boxes to experiencing more.
What would you say set Cable Bahamas apart when it was first licensed?
I think what set us apart when we were first licensed was, first of all, we had exclusivity on cable TV. BTC was very much focused on what I call fixed line services. They were fixed voice, and so the products were very decoupled. So we had the opportunity to bring TV. So that's what set us apart, because we had this exclusivity for 15 years. Once we got into TV, we said, listen, there was an opportunity to do internet. We didn't have fixed voice. Voice was a big thing, but we got into fixed voice much later. In 2011 or so is when we got into fixed voice. But there was decoupling. Now we have this real integration of services more and more, where you see that, listen, customers won't be able to go to one operator and get 4 or 5 services. You won't be able to get a wireless phone. You won't be able to get a fixed phone if you got Grammy or somebody a little older in the house. You won't be able to get internet to your home. You won't be able to get TV if necessary. And now people want to say, well, I won't buy a Ring device so I could keep secure and keep track of what's happening, because you won't feel safe. And then there's so many other add-ons that we see this basic infrastructure enabling, which is why we talk about this idea of being the leader enabling connected lifestyles and experiences. That's at the center of what we've been doing, right? And so that is really what you see the evolution of technology looking like, and our role in that. When Cable Bahamas was born, is that we continued to advance, and we believe we've advanced quicker than our competitors quite often, and making sure at the end of the day that the Bahamas had the best infrastructure, that we are able to think about what the future needs are. So now the big buzz today is around AI. Well, fundamentally for AI to work, you need power. You need power in terms of electricity, but you also need compute power and access to the internet. And so while people say, well, where is Cable Bahamas going to be? You're going to need lots of bits and bytes that we can be able to deliver to you on our fiber network that is already prepared for 10 gig speeds to your house. So today you may say, I need it. But I'm sure tomorrow there's going to be a need for more capacity. And that is what we continue to have to plan ahead, with a spirit of expectation and a history of continuing to evolve. And that is really what Cable Bahamas is representing, and have taken the mantle from when we launched to where we are today, and preparing the Bahamas for tomorrow.
Awesome. So I want us to get back to the origin of the company. There were multiple parties vying for the cable contract. Were Bahamians competing for that contract as well? And why do you think it was ultimately went to the Canadians?
Yeah. So this is one that I can't answer the question in the sense that I don't know the facts around it. But what I can tell you was the essence of what I've learned around this question has been one where the government of the day felt that in our national development, somebody who probably had the experience of having done it before was probably better than somebody who had not done it before. And so what they tried to do, as I recall, was they allowed a Bahamian participation in the equity or ownership of the business, but thought that the operational excellence should have been foreign. And so they allowed them to have what I would call a controlling economic interest, which came across as a trust, where they didn't necessarily own 50% of the business. They owned a trust that controlled the business and had a lot of Bahamian ownership. So at the time, as I recall, BPL had owned 5% because there was a restriction that nobody could own more than 5% outside of the founding Canadians. And so that's when the government, they got BPL to buy a piece. I think all the corporations bought a chunk of Cable Bahamas and then was consolidated in the national insurance interest over time. And so that is how the evolution happened. And so yes, Bahamians did compete for it. And yes, there is some Bahamians who felt that, listen, they were disenfranchised and not given the opportunity. But my understanding of that is because the government of the day wanted to see the country advance and felt that somebody who had done it before was more important than the economic impact of having a Bahamian company do it on itself. And that is why you were seeing Cable Bahamas evolve from having foreign ownership to now 100% Bahamian ownership. So while it did not happen at the start, the evolution still resulted in what I think the political director at the time wanted to happen, which was to get more ownership, transfer of knowledge to Bahamians at the end. And we've done a better job of that than probably most companies in this country.
Absolutely. And so as we know, the Butler family became a major shareholder. What led to the investment? What did you think the family saw that others probably didn't see?
Well, I think from a Butler perspective, one of the things that I think is no secret is that we have always been nationalist. Mm-hmm. We have always been focused on this notion of education and empowerment of people. That has been fundamental to who Samailo was. And I think my father and uncles, who would have been responsible for that decision, thought it was important, not just in cable. I mean, we have been involved in many institutions where we recognize that it was important for Bahamians to own it. Mm-hmm. And so we have always been blessed, fortunately, to be good stewards of capital and to invest in things that, quite frankly, were guesswork. Because I don't know that we didn't know Phil Keepin and the team that was putting together Cable Bahamas, mm-hmm. but we knew this was our country. Mm-hmm. And it was more important to be at the table than not at the table. And that is really how we got involved in this process and why we continue to be significant investors in any opportunity that allows more Bahamian ownership, more Bahamian transfer of knowledge, more Bahamian excellence to be at the forefront. And so that's how, as a family, I think we got involved in Cable Bahamas and very proud of that from that perspective.
So the docuseries, The Untold Story of Cable Bahamas, premieres on January 18th. What is something you want people to walk away from this, taking away from episode 1 for sure?
Well, I think the one thing I would like our audience to take from episode 1 is that Cable Bahamas, has an incredible story mm-hmm. of Bahamian excellence. We may have started with some political controversy, and I know there are many people who talk about the story of Cable Bahamas. But what they will learn that no doubt, when you see how we perform in Dorian, when you see, even the challenges that we have from time to time, there is a lot of Bahamian excellence mm-hmm. that is undergirding, supporting our networks, even in the good, Dorian, and keeping the Bahamas connected, and in the bad, sometimes when we don't necessarily connect your home the way you want us to. Mm-hmm. It is not that we are not focused on you, our customers. Nobody's more focused on you, our customers. And we are continuing to refine our processes and invest in everyday Bahamians to make sure that we do our part in national development and positioning the Bahamas to remain the best little country on earth.
Is there anything in the documentary specifically that you insisted absolutely had to be in here because it is core to the journey of Cable Bahamas?
Yeah, I think this tension, right? Because I tell people, I don't know if it's the untold story of Cable Bahamas or sometimes the inconvenient story of Cable Bahamas. And I say it because oftentimes people get caught up in the political rhetoric. Well, the foreigners started Cable Bahamas, we had to use the Canadians. Yeah, that's true. There's no secret about
Where
that.
we are now.
But look at us now. There's a different story. You compare us to some other people, we got a lot to be proud of. We got a lot to continue to build on. And when you look down the road at your street corner, you're going to see that that's your cousin. That's your auntie. That's your uncle who working right here, who helping to keep us connected, who making that sacrifice at that storm, probably sleeping in that head end, to make sure that when the hurricane pass or when whatever event happen, we are doing all we can. And let me just say, not because we Bahamian mean we should become entitled. Every day the message to me, to all of our colleagues, and I want all of our employees to hear this, is that we got to continue to be better. We got to continue to be more efficient and effective. Our country is depending on us. We ain't got no choice. We ain't here to be entitled. We're here to make our country better. And so I am so proud of many of our associates. I recently, over the last 90 days, had an opportunity to spend a lot of time teaching and engaging with all of our associates, Megan. And I must tell you, I'm so impressed with the level of talent. People just need time. People just need to be nurtured and mentored. And I could tell you, man, I am so excited about what is to come and how people have received my engagement with them and how they have responded by saying, I get it now, man. I could see how we could fix this alive fiber problem, man. I could see how we could be better. I can tell you, I'm looking forward into 2026 and the second half of our financial year for some incredible customer experiences coming from our teams. And so I want people to tune in. The story of your auntie, your uncle, your cousin is riding on us. The story of Bahamian excellence is captured in this sometimes inconvenient or inconvenient story of Cable Bahamas, but we caption as the untold story of Cable Bahamas.
Absolutely. 30 years in, I'm sure we're looking for another 30 and another and another and another. What do you want the legacy of Cable Bahamas to be?
I've said it. Our legacy is how do we continue to transform, to give people the opportunity to experience more, to remain at the center of the ecosystem of development technologically, but as a part of the technological success, we got to make sure we bring our colleagues, our Bahamian brothers and sisters along. We ain't need foreigners to do everything for us.
Nope.
No doubt sometimes we need foreigners to do things for us because there's no doubt if you look at AI at the forefront and as we're seeing the global landscape change, this fight is between the titans, whether the Chinese and the Americans. There's no question about that. So we always gonna have to look to them for the leadership. But that mean we gotta depend on them exclusively. We won't be able to take their ideas to be in their classrooms, to be in their environments, and to learn what we gotta do. But to protect the best little country on earth. And that is about every cable Bahamian, making sure that we continue to bring our best selves and don't let complacency get in the way and don't get relationship because I vex with you cause us to not serve our customers or not grow and develop. That is really what we want to make sure that we are charting the course over the next 30 years because again, Megan, we started with TV and voice. We don't know what the future is going to hold. And if we keep that mindset of what the value creation is going to look like down the road, Megan, I don't know what it could be. We may have the next set of Bahamian bots. The next set of Bahamian AI may be manifested right here by cable Bahamians, and that may be the products we sell. And I don't know if that's where the future holds, but I can tell you we want to keep that mindset open because I always tell our people, AI ain't going to take our jobs. A human being who can manage AI and do AI may take your job.
That's an excellent point, Mr. Butler. This has been an excellent conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you so much for the work that you do, whether people realize it or not. I'm sure there's a lot of work. We know that there's a lot of work behind the scenes keeping us all connected. Thank you so much for being with us here today. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break, but when we return, we'll have our final thoughts of the day. And to Mr. Butler, thank you so much for the work you do, whether people realize it or not. In a country made of islands, telecommunications is never just about technology. It's about vision and nationhood. And that's what makes this story worth telling. It's a reminder that progress doesn't just appear, it's built, it's fought for, and it's maintained. As a reminder, the docu-series, The Untold Story of Cable Bahamas, premieres this Sunday, January 18th at 8 p.m. on our TV channel 212 and Rev YouTube page. That's it for On the Record. Thank you for watching, and from all of us here, have a good night.